All right, Nitro. Number 153, also August 17th, 1998. Hogan and his crew come out for a promo. As noted, constant references up and down this 3-hour show. Do not turn the channel. The main event goes 10 seconds. Hogan says he is done playing games with geeks and the media, and he calls out Goldberg. And immediately says, tonight, Giant will beat Goldberg's ass and give the belt back to me. What a great heel. Calls out the babyface when he's too scared to fight himself. Giant, by the way, looked 600 pounds here.
This was also like one of those dusty promos from 87. Hogan alerting us he's the best, he's the top guy, gonna take the title back. Only thing he was missing was that cap.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Mean Gene and J.J. Dillon plugged War Games.
Oh my God. The worst War Games ever. Ever. I'm pretty sure, I'd have to go back. I think I gave it -5 stars. I can't remember. I just remember it was just atrocious.
So, from the get-go, it's not 2 teams of 4, 2 teams of 5. It's 3 teams of 3.
Yes, we have got to have a NWO black and white team with Hulk Hogan as captain, a WCW team with DDP as captain, and a Wolfpack team with Kevin Nash as the captain.
Yeah. Still 2 rings, still a cage, still a roof. It's going to start with 3 men and still add a guy every 2 minutes. They said that Dylan actually said there'll be a coin flip every 2 minutes. I hope he did not misspeak and that was their actual plan. Plus, how do you flip a coin with 3 teams? Then, just to cap everything off, he says, whoever wins this match will get a title shot against Goldberg at Halloween Havoc.
Can't wait.
Well, at this point, it's not War Games at all. Because War Games is all about teams. This is now just a Royal Rumble in a cage or Elimination Chamber without eliminations. It's just the first pin wins.
Well, see, the idea is all these factions just want somebody to hold the championship, so they're the top faction. That's the idea. He also said that Hogan claimed there was nobody that he'd never beaten.
Yeah, sure to throw this out there at random.
Yes.
Yeah.
And he said he'd have to think about that for a while. This was brought up again later, as we'll get to.
Nitro Party clips. The dude who was pretending to be the Giant he did not have man boobs, he had man titties.
Terrible. Is it a positive or a negative? Now that I think about it.
It's a fact. So, moving on to terrible. Steve McMichael versus Sick Boy. Did they not do this match last week?
This match is the worst match in the world. It gets worse every time. Mongo is worse every time I see him in the ring. I don't even know how it's possible. Sick Boy missed his dropkick. Mongo just leaped in the air and went flying. Sick Boy, I am not making this up. Sick Boy fucked up a vertical suplex. No one can fuck that up. An untrained person could do a vertical suplex into a pool. They fucked it up.
The funny thing was, again, they were pushing don't turn the channel for the 10-second main event, and I was begging this match to end in 10 seconds, but it just kept going. Literally one non-stop gifable moment from the start to the end. Mongo won with a tombstone. Please never wrestle again. Mean Gene brought out DDP, asked, who are your 2 partners in War Games going to be? And Paige says,
I was looking through my Rolodex.
That's his first comment.
Yeah.
Which is actually not the most ludicrous thing he said. He said, this is too important a question to handle via a phone call. So I got on an airplane and flew out west.
Because he wanted to meet this man face to face.
That's the most ridiculous thing anyone's ever said.
Well, sometimes I can believe that. Like, if you're trying to do a very important negotiation, you don't text or call the guy. You're like, I'm going to fly out there and I'm going to meet you face to face and talk about it.
You know what? In hindsight, given who it turns out he was talking about, This actually does make more sense.
Yeah.
So Paige says this guy is, Hogan is 0-1 against this guy, and he'll find out who it is in September. Then he starts talking about Bret Hart.
By the way, they couldn't have started this last week or a couple of weeks ago where they start talking about a man that Hulk Hogan has never beaten.
Yeah.
It started on this show.
It did.
Dude.
So Bret comes out to defend himself.
With the U.S. title. Did you even notice?
I did. Was he not supposed to have it?
He's the champion again.
Oh.
He beat Luger
that's right.
on Thunder.
Forgot.
Another incredible Lex Luger title run. There was not one word on this show. There was not one appearance by Lex Luger. Listen, I know that Lex Luger wasn't really the most popular guy at the time. I know that he's probably never going to be in the Hall of Fame or anything like that. This guy was fucked 6 ways from Sunday by this company. They fucked up his world title reign a year ago. They fucked up his U.S. title reign here. The guy was so much over than he had any right to be, and they fucked it up every time. It's mind-blowing.
I had completely forgotten all this until you mentioned it right now. Yeah, there was no talk about Bret Hart winning the U.S. title on Thunder. 87 pictures of like Dean Malenko and Kurt Hennig arguing, but nothing about a title change. So Bret says, lists a bunch of guys who are on the shelf because of him: Benoit, Booker T, Randy Savage, Roddy Piper, and he accepts Page's challenge for a match tonight. Mean Gene brings out Raven for an interview.
Oh, this was as bad as anything on Raw.
Horace interrupts.
By the way, this fake Raven music, it's bizarre. They can't use the fake even flow.
No.
So they got to use some other stupid music.
I'm pretty sure it's his WWE music, or at least one of his versions. But yeah, things like, I mean, I've gotten used to Jericho's theme on Nitro now, but it's an anachronism. It doesn't fit there. So Horace interrupts immediately. Says Raven makes him sick to his stomach. He's watched Raven's back for months, and Raven hasn't done anything for anyone in the flock. Challenges Raven to a match. Raven accepts, but it will be a tag match, and he will pick the partners. So he books Horace and Kanyon versus Raven and Saturn. Saturn and Kanyon come storming out. Saturn says, "No, Raven, I will never team with you." Raven says, "Are you scared?" And Saturn says, "I'll team with you, but if you try to tag me, I'll punch you out."
Now stop right there. Raven has booked a match. It is Raven and Saturn versus Kanyon and Horace. Saturn doesn't want to do it, but then after he is belittled, after he's called a chicken, he says, "Fine, I'll do it, but if you try to tag me, I'll punch you." So out comes J.J. Dillon, and he says, "Sounds to me like we've got a verbal agreement for a match." He says, "Raven, you booked the match. Saturn, you've agreed. Kanyon, you've agreed. You're nodding your head. And Horace, you've agreed. The match is official." But then he says, "However, if any of you punch your partner or cause your partner to lose, you'll be suspended for 90 days. Oh, how he fucked Saturn.
Pretty much.
He signed the match based on another verbal agreement and then changed the stipulations after the match had been signed. What a dick.
And why?
For no good reason.
Why do any of these men want this match?
Why would he even care?
I don't know. I don't understand.
And he added pinfall or submission only.
High Voltage versus the Dancing Dildos.
I have no memory of this match.
This match, this screams WCW.
Oh, I remember now.
High Voltage, Alex Wright, and Disco Inferno. Well, it went 3 minutes. Meng ran out and killed everyone. He tongue and death gripped them all to death.
This actually was one of the better things on the show.
Well, it was, but...
He's killing everybody, including security guys.
And the ref.
And he's running wild. The place is going nuts because, you know, a dude killing everybody's cool. And then they have one other guy come in with mace. And he allegedly sprays this monster in the eyes with mace. And Meng no-sells it and puts him in the tongue and death grip. They go nuts. Because there are certain things that will always work. Even in the middle of the worst show of all time, there are certain things that will always work. And a guy that kills everybody and is impervious to mace, that'll always work.
The last guy, the macer, if you will, first of all, he clearly had not practiced with the mace backstage. I think he almost sprayed himself in the face with the mace, which would have been the greatest...
Perhaps it was Mason Ryan. Is that possible?
I don't know. I do know he had the exact same haircut as the Wizard of Oz. So, anyway.
It's just so bad. But I did love.
Now here's
Meng
my question about this
everybody.
stuff. Yes, it was cool. Yes, the crowd loved it.
But why?
What? Meng just lost to Goldberg last week.
I know. I asked the
Where's
same
this leading
question.
to?
I asked this same question. Like, I loved it, but I couldn't get it.
Right.
Like, what and why and who and what?
And then, this was, I think, the dumbest thing on either show.
This was the worst thing on either show. That's true.
Eddie Guerrero comes out in street clothes with his bag. He says, "This is an unscheduled interview. If you cut me off, I'll just go to another network and say my piece."
Oh, you had no contract?
All I know, the one positive about this, Eddie's mullet was glorious here.
It's all I could look at.
It's like, just look at the hair going down his shoulders. It seemed to never end. So he says, "I am tired of being mistreated and unappreciated by Eric Bischoff." And he's rambling. He's losing his focus. He's all over the place.
At one point, he just couldn't remember anything. And he stood there staring at the camera for like 5 full seconds. It was like the end of a WWE interview. He just stares off into space.
Yeah.
And then he just started rambling again.
He says, "Bischoff's holding down young talent. He's holding me down. He's got something personal against me." Crowd, of course, thinks Eddie's a heel, so starts chanting, "Eddie sucks." They have no idea what's going on. Eddie says, "Bischoff is stopping me from climbing the ladder, so it's Eric's fault, I guess, that Eddie has been losing matches and not winning titles."
Then he's talking about how the only reason I didn't come out here earlier is because of my nephew Chavo, who I love.
I love Chavo, he says.
I'm like, what the fuck are you talking about?
So the
you guys
past
have been
3
feuding.
months is bullshit, is what you're telling me. I've wasted my time on your shit.
Yep.
And he says, "I've got a wife and 2 kids to support, but I don't care. Eric, you can take this job and shove it." And he left.
Well, first, he had to pour the coffee all over himself. Because there'd been an incident backstage where Eric did one of his freakouts and threw coffee at Eddie.
Aha.
Of course, nobody knows this.
I didn't know this.
But it's a story that they got to bring into this shoot interview here. And then he tells him to take his job and shove it up his you know what.
Yeah.
I'm like, I'm so astonished by this period of wrestling. This glory period of wrestling.
How romanticized it is.
It's atrocious. It's so much worse than Raw. It's so much worse than SmackDown today that people complain about all the time. This is like the glory era that children grew up with, and they wanted to become wrestlers. Why?
I don't know.
What was going on in your life that you watched this and wanted to do it? Fuck.
All I know is this was like -4 stars on paper, and then Eddie made it -5 stars with a terrible promo.
Unbelievably horrific, I wrote. That's probably not being mean enough.
So we got Canyon and Horace versus Raven and Saturn.
This was almost as bad as that interview. What a mess.
It was a complete and total mess. I wrote down way too much about it, frankly. What I remember about
That's
this...
because way too much happened.
Well, that's part of it. The very first spot they did was Saturn shoved Raven, and he got schoolboyed, and Saturn had to break up the pin to avoid a 90-day suspension. A lot of weapons being used, a lot of suplexes, which were cool, because Saturn is cool. The highlight of this was when Canyon and Horace made a comeback and whipped Saturn and Raven into each other. And these dudes ran at each other as hard as they could and went smack in the middle of the ring. That was great. Canyon, of course, had to hit a bunch of moves the guys would kick out of. Because God bless Canyon. He could do cool moves. He had no idea how to get them over. Eventually, Saturn pinned Horace with a DVD. There's more.
Horace went to hit somebody... accidentally hit Canyon. Saturn DVD'd him for the pin.
Yeah.
Now, the crowd did pop for the finish. I got to give him that. But it was a mess.
Well, the post-match was even worse.
The post-match, oh my God.
Raven and the Flock attack Saturn. Kidman tries to stop them. Raven DDTs him. Horace... I'm angry now. This whole thing... this bullshit began because Horace... interrupted a Raven promo and said, "I want to beat up Raven." Now Horace interrupts Raven and says, "I want to beat up Saturn." So he beats up Saturn and then turns around and Raven beats up him. I was baffled. I was bewildered.
Tony
confused,
in the booth had absolutely
dumbstruck.
No idea what was going on.
If you gave me like a huge whiteboard and photos of all these guys and markers trying to connect who the alliances and feuds and history, I would be clueless. I don't understand any of this. It sucks. The Wolfpack out came out. They were excited for War Games. The Wolfpack left. That whole thing. Scott Norton versus Scott Putski. Realize here there's Scotts all over the place in WCW. Norton, Putski, Hall, Steiner, Riggs, Levy.
Powerbomb finish, waste of time.
Yes.
But it was one of the better things on the show.
Sure.
Now I think about it.
Hogan is back.
I could not even believe when they came out again.
I can.
See, the reason is because I had forgotten they were in the ring for Warrior's promo. I thought Warrior had just debuted and did the promo in an empty ring. Let me tell you something about this promo you may not remember. So, first off, Hogan is there and wants to know who DDP's mystery man is. He says, "Who out there can I not beat?" Everyone thinks he's talking about Goldberg. And so they start chanting Goldberg's name because he also has not beaten Goldberg. Lights flicker, they go in and out, and it is the debut of The Warrior in WCW. He cannot be the Ultimate Warrior. He does every trick in the book to say the words Ultimate and Warrior as often as possible, but not actually ever saying them back to back.
Yes.
Fans go nuts.
His appearance was awesome.
Place goes crazy. Hogan sells it great. Mouth agape. "I thought you were dead," he says. Fans are chanting for the Warrior. And the Warrior then proceeds to cut his promo. Now, here's what's really interesting about this. So everybody on the board who saw this before us, talk about how terrible this promo was. At the time, this was like a great promo. Like, people were raving about this promo when it happened. Part of it is, Warrior never cut a good promo in his life, and this was the closest thing to it.
That's true.
And so people were like, that was by far the best promo the Warrior's ever cut in his life. Now, promos are much different nowadays. I don't know what it is, but, I mean, I watched it again, and it wasn't as good as I remembered the first time, but the guy was lucid.
Yeah.
He had the crowd in the palm of his hands.
Yes.
Everything he said, I mean, he had good timing on everything that he said.
Yes, good delivery.
Good delivery.
Unbelievable presence.
Sure.
Star power, aura, whatever you want to call it.
I mean, this was not bad. Now, let me tell you something, because I remember this vividly. Like, this was the peak, because it's all downhill from this moment. So if you're watching this and you don't remember when it originally happened and you thought this was terrible, just you wait. This is the pinnacle. This was Ric Flair and Dusty Rhodes all rolled into one compared to what is to come.
So, did you mention that Warrior was wearing blue jeans tucked into his custom-made red and white cowboy boots?
Yeah.
That's an important detail. So Warrior's promo starts, and he's really, really good, and every person in the building is, like you say, in the palm of his hand. He's in control of the whole room, and he's awesome. And then it just goes forever. I will say that. This promo was like 15 minutes long.
It did go way too long. But listen, I watch these 15-minute, 20-minute Raw opening promos, and it's like, they don't need to go this long.
This was a 20-minute promo that was good for 10.
Yeah.
The Raw promos are 20-minute promos that are good for no.
Sure, but I mean, I've seen it before. This was not high on the list of the worst 20-minute promos I ever saw.
No. Finally, he says, "I'll be back next week." The ring fills with smoke. The lights go off. There's pyro, and then he has vanished.
Tony said, and I quote, "The Warrior has literally vaporized right before our eyes." And I mean, he was kind of right, because he did turn into water vapor, is what it appeared to me.
Yeah. Kurt Hennig versus Dean Malenko.
We should mention the Warrior signal.
Yes, the Warrior signal was shown in the arena.
Yeah, he stole the Batman catchphrase, same Warrior time, same Warrior channel.
Yes.
Except he had one other. Same Warrior time, same Warrior... What was the second one? There was one before
Place.
channel. Because everybody
Time, place, channel?
Yeah, something like that. And then he showed his...
He vanishes. So they go to commercial. They come back. The Nitro Girls dance a bit. They go to commercial again. They come back. Kurt Hennig and Dean Malenko come out. They stall for a minute, and then they go to commercial again. And at this point, I realized Warriors promo went way long and fucked up their entire format. It had to have happened. So they're doing this match.
Oh, God, I'm remembering the Warrior stuff now. Fuck.
Rude gets on the apron.
Trust me, we're going to apologize to Raw next week. Just trust me.
Rude gets on the apron. Dean goes after him. Rude hits a knee from the apron, wipes it on the floor, and Hennig hits a fisherman suplex for the win.
So not as good as you'd think.
It really wasn't.
But Rude was doing and taking a lot. He was desperate to get back in the ring at this point.
Yep. Buff Bagwell and Scott Steiner came out for a promo. Literally half of Steiner's body was wrapped in casts and bandages. And they had some geek in a smock out there saying he was a doctor. Cecil Schwartz.
Guy just pretending to be a burnout.
So Scott explains...
Probably wrote this show.
Rick Steiner had hit him in the elbow bone, and all the bones were connected, so his knee hurt. Doctors said, right on. And they showed Scotty couldn't even hold his arm up. It was all very sad. And they asked, will Scotty be ready to wrestle on the September 13th? And the doctor said, right on again. I don't know what that means. Rick came out and promised to beat up Scotty at Fall Brawl. This was dumb.
Well, the whole thing was Scott was trying to avoid the match. That was the whole point of all of this. And then Rick comes out and he says, at Fall Brawl, I'm going to show who the better Steiner is. And then Scott gets fired up and accepts the match. I was like, that was anticlimactic. What a waste of my time.
Most of the show was a waste of time. Chavo Guerrero versus Chris Jericho versus Stevie Ray.
Boring.
It was. Chavo was out here still pretending to be crazy after Eddie came out an hour ago and told us it was all fake. Jericho keeps tricking Chavo into attacking Stevie, and Chavo is so dumb, he keeps falling for it, and he's the babyface in the match. So the ref gets bumped. Stevie pulls out a gimmick.
The slapjack.
A slapjack. He wallops Jericho with it. Out comes Giant. Okay, here's the spot. Giant is going to grab Stevie and chokeslam him.
Oh, there's a lesson to be learned from this.
You got that?
Yeah.
I mean, it was very complicated and elaborate. Perhaps some of you weren't paying attention. I'll do it again. Giant's going to grab Stevie and chokeslam him. I don't think I've ever seen any wrestler deadweight a guy like Stevie did for the Giant here. He gave him zero assistance. But it doesn't matter because it's a fucking Giant. And he had one hand on Stevie's neck and one hand, not even like on the small of his back, it was like up between his shoulders blades. And just like by pressing his hands together, he lifted this 300-pound man high into the air and slammed him down to the earth. Like Stevie Ray, and just in terms of height and weight, he's like my size, or pretty close to it.
Well, Stevie Ray didn't want to go up.
That's clear.
Because he didn't want to take the bump. But the problem was, like, if he would have jumped, it's very likely the Giant would have set him down pretty easily. Mm-hmm. Like, have you ever seen, like, Undertaker choke slam somebody? I mean, he lets him down so easy. Granted, this was not the Undertaker. But still, Stevie, because he didn't want to take the bump, made Giant lift him up. Uh-huh. And then Giant was like, well, you're only halfway up. And so I'm going to overcompensate by driving you as hard as I can down to the mat.
With my weight on top of you.
It would have been a lot easier to just jump.
Oh, yeah. This was astonishing. So here's the finish. All three guys are down. The ref is doing a triple knockout count. Chavo was about to get to his feet, but Jericho grabs the ref. Chavo then trips and falls out of the ring and is knocked out. And then Jericho gets to his feet. The ref counts out Stevie. Jericho wins.
The storyline is that Jericho is the king of loopholes, but my God, this sucked.
Could they have found
and
a
that's
more
the
complicated...
worst gimmick, the king of loopholes.
Yes.
Like, talk about designing a gimmick to not get over.
And they showed this chokeslam again. I was in awe, maybe even more awestruck the second time. It's not like it was a suplex or a fireman's carry where you can get under the guy and use leverage. He had to carry this guy in front of him and get up to the sky. The Giant is terrifying. Breaking news, I know. Bret Hart versus DDP. Now, look, we've mentioned this several weeks in a row now. Bret Hart was not giving it his all at this point in his WCW run. He had given up. And sometimes, in his promos, it makes him better. There's the complete lack of giving a fuck. This had to have been the most boring Bret Hart match of all time.
Really? I didn't think it was that bad. Now, the finish is another story entirely.
Bret cut Page off, hit 75,000 moves in a row. At last, Page makes his comeback. The ref gets bumped.
How many ref bumps were on this show?
For the second match in a row, probably more earlier. Bret grabs a gimmick. Second match in a row, somebody's done that. But then...
I'll tell you what happened.
I know what happened. I'm just...
Bret gets a gimmick, and he waffles DDP, and DDP's knocked out. But the referee's also knocked out. So Bret instead of just pinning the guy, he wants the referee to believe.
Why did everything on this week have to be so complicated?
So
in all matches on all shows.
He pulls DDP's dead body on top of him, and he also puts the gimmick down DDP's tights. The ref wakes up, he goes to count. Brett, quote, kicks out. He goes to put the guy in the sharpshooter. DDP is tapping furiously. Nick Patrick doesn't call it. And finally, DDP gets the ropes. Page hits a diamond cutter out of nowhere. Brett gets his foot under the ropes. And then Brett stands up and says, "Hey, Nick, he hit me with something. Look in his trunks." DDP, not knowing, because he was unconscious, that Brett put something in his trunks, stands there while the referee fishes around in his genitals, pulls out a gimmick, and calls for the disqualification. Now, if this were like a Stampede wrestling show, or like any other show that wasn't absolute bullshit, it would have been a very creative screwjob finish. Instead, on this show, it was so overcomplicated. It was just too much. Like, I liked it, but I hated it. This was not the show to do it on. On a show like this, it was just another screwjob bullshit finish. On a show where Tony for 3 hours has been telling us not to watch Raw because of a 10-second main event.
Two things. First, in their defense, I don't think tap outs were a thing yet.
No, they were.
Pro wrestling? Were they?
Yeah, for sure. Shamrock. Every single
right.
Shamrock finish was a tap out. There were tap outs. I don't know what was going on in this match.
Well, the other point I was going to say was my comment about Brett half-assing things. He goes to do the sharpshooter, and he realizes he has fucked it up. So he stops, does a headbutt to the balls, and then puts the sharpshooter on. Yeah, this is no good. And that finish. Oh, that fucking finish. Goldberg versus Giant. I don't know how big this arena was, but it took Goldberg 10 minutes to get from the locker room to the ring.
It's so amazing watching on Apple TV where they've got that time thing along the bottom. And, like, you can just see, like, there's no time left on the show. Goldberg's still walking from the backstage area. And then you realize his matches are always a minute.
Yeah. So, Giant manhandles him a bit. Goldberg grabs him, body slams him, places going apeshit for everything they do. Disciple tries to interfere. Thank God Goldberg was having none of that. And I said earlier that Giant may have been 600 pounds. I'm even more convinced of that now because in this 3-minute match, he got as blown up as any Brawl for All guy. Just exhausted. Goldberg hits a spear, and Disciple attacks for the DQ.
Can you imagine? After 3 hours of complaining about the Raw main event, that was their finish.
Yes. So they're working over Goldberg. Scott Hall runs out. Kevin Nash runs out.
Well, first Goldberg speared and jackhammered Disciple, so I guess that was supposed to send us home happy.
I suppose. So Hall runs out, then Nash runs out. Then Hall dodges a spear. Nash gets speared instead. Second time that's happened. And Nash and Goldberg go nose to nose, and the show ended. I wrote here much better than Raw. I don't know if that's true. It was the better show.
It was better than Raw, but it was still bad.
Yeah.
And let me tell you, the one thing about Raw is it sucks, but you know it's going to get better at some point. This show sucks, and it's just depressing.
Because you know.
The build to Nash versus Goldberg is so fucking depressing. The reappearance of the Warrior and knowing where it goes, and the Fall Brawl match, and the second Warrior-Hogan match, it's so depressing. It's only getting worse.
Uh-huh. And we know you're right. There is no hope because we know how the story ends.
There's no hope. Not an iota.
Oh God. Anyway,
I mean, the only bright cloud is eventually Russo shows up and tries to cut it back to 2 hours. So we only get 2 hours of horror instead of 3. That's the only bright spot coming. And the very end, when for like 2 months it's good, and then they go out of business.
That's right.
Well, there you go, everybody. Hey, The Death of WCW is available at audible.com. It's an audiobook. In fact, if you go to my Twitter, at Brian Alvarez,
that's true.
Pinned at the top is a link where you can do an Audible free trial, absolutely free, and one of your books can be the Death of WCW audiobook.
Actually, let's recap this. This is important. You lived through this at the time in the 90s.
Yep.
You wrote a book in the early 2000s.
Yep.
You did a revised copy of that book.
Yep.
You did an audio copy of that book.
Yep.
And now we're doing these shows. You've gone through the Nitro era 5 times.
I am such a glutton.
You poor bastard.
I am such a glutton. I don't know what's wrong with me.
I don't either. Actually, this explains a lot about what is wrong with you.
Clearly, the site's making money. Because there's
so.
no other reason I would ever do this.
So.
All right, everybody. That's it from here. We'll be back. I'll be
Tuesday.
back Wednesday, and then everything else will be from Vegas for the next 5 days or so. And then, we'll be back here on Tuesday with another retro show. So get ready for that, everybody. And that is it. We will talk to you again after a while.
Adios.